Good morning, this is Shelby Law with the Great Basin Fire Potential Briefing for Monday, July 6th, 2020. Hot, dry, and windy conditions continue for the next couple of days as a few little low pressure systems try to move into the Pacific Northwest, but we stay generally hot and dry through the week with periods of gusty winds over mainly Utah and Nevada. So for today, low relative humidities across much of Utah and Nevada with those higher gusts moving into the mainly the western portions of the state. On Tuesday, those winds spread a little bit further east into southeast Idaho and across much of Utah. Relative humidities are just a little bit higher there over southeast Idaho. And then on Wednesday, the gusty winds really only continue across far southeast Utah. Yesterday was generally warm and dry with just a few little thunderstorms there across far eastern Utah. And the initial attack seems to be spreading a little bit further north into northeast Utah and up into even portions of southern Idaho, with the majority of fires still occurring across the south. Observed precipitation for the past 7 and 30 days is shown here. We did have a good amount of precip move through the Idaho and far northern Nevada and northern Utah last week. In the past 30 days over the past month, we have seen a fair amount of precip over the central Idaho mountains, even western Wyoming, but a very dry signal continuing over southern Nevada and southwest Utah. Our ERCs are pretty high across southern Utah, some stations coming in above the 90th percentile. Further north, the values are still below the 50th percentile for much of Idaho, where those cooler weather conditions have persisted through the month of June. And even over northern Nevada, those values are still between the 50th and 70th percentile, but on the upward trend. Certainly, all these values will be coming up this week as the hot and dry weather continues. A closer look at a couple of those areas where we've seen some fire activity shows over southwest Utah. Those values are up near the 97th percentile, definitely moving upward right now, where normally we should see those values going downward with the influx of moisture from the monsoon. But seeing as though we have been very dry and there's really no sign of the monsoon in sight, those values are going to continue to climb. Same is true for northeast Utah. Those values have been increasing rapidly over the past week, when, again, this time of year, normally we see them decreasing. So out of the ordinary for them to be so high and continuing to increase this week under the warm and dry conditions. Sagebrush live fuel moistures are shown here. Here's a site in north central Nevada where those values are near normal for the time of year. And then over western Utah, where they are setting new historical records and have been for much of the year, still very low for the time of year, and we can expect to continue to see the sagebrush being a major contributor to large fire growth in western Utah. The satellite imagery for this morning shows a high pressure centered over the central U.S. Very dry airs moving up into the Great Basin, particularly western and southern Nevada. As we have an area of low pressure trying to move into the Pacific Northwest, this will increase winds across the Great Basin through the week, but shouldn't really bring much relief in terms of any cooler weather or showers or anything like that. All of that stays north of the geographic area for the most part, other than maybe the central Idaho mountains. So for today, warm and dry for the Great Basin and windy across far western and southern Nevada. And high-risk triggers have been issued for those winds. Taking a closer look at single-digit relative humidities over much of Nevada and even southern Utah. So very, very dry with poor overnight recoveries as well. The winds shown here are showing the strongest winds right along the Sierra front, with some higher gusts a little bit further east and south as well. On Tuesday, the low over the Pacific Northwest scoots a little bit further east over the northern Rockies and may bring a slight chance of some showers to the central Idaho mountains, but for the most part we're highlighting the wind on Tuesday over southeast Nevada and across much of central and southern and eastern Utah. Still very low relative humidities across much of the region, single digits into the very low teens. And here in the purples and pinks is where we're expected to see those very gusty winds on Tuesday, with gusts up to 40 to maybe 45 miles an hour there. Also gusty in eastern Idaho and western Wyoming, where relative humidities are slightly higher. Then on Wednesday, that low kind of lifts off to the east, and the winds should die down for much of the geographic area, but we will still see some gusty winds over far southern and southeast Utah and have high risk issued there. Elsewhere, lighter winds with continued dry conditions. So still those very low relative humidities, that does not change, and lighter winds across the central portions of the Great Basin, with still some strong gusts across southern Utah, the Arizona Strip, and western Wyoming as well. 3-day precip totals are shown here, which really we're just looking for continued dry weather, except maybe some showers right along the northern periphery of those central Idaho mountains. On Thursday, the ridge builds back in, once again slides a little bit further west towards California, as another trough tries to drop into the Pacific Northwest. The ridge continues to dominate on Friday with warm, dry, and generally light winds area-wide on Friday. That pattern generally continues into Saturday with the trough over in southern Canada and a ridge over the Great Basin. We may begin to see a little bit of moisture try to move up into the Great Basin Saturday into Sunday, but right now there's not a lot of confidence in that, so we'll watch for any threat of dry thunderstorms coming this weekend. But for the most part, we're looking for hot, dry conditions with some winds in the first part of the week. 7-day total shown here, really just looking for dry conditions through the entire week. And as we go into the middle of July, July 13th through the 19th, still expecting above normal temperatures for much of the Great Basin, with below normal chances for precipitation over much of Idaho and Utah. This concludes today's fire potential briefing. Please check back tomorrow for the latest updates.